Hi, Rhea.
Hey,
Hi. Are your
how's it
kiddos
going?
home today?
No, it was a Valentine's breakfast with dad or something like that. So,
Aw,
yeah. So I got
get
to
to
stay home this
rest.
morning.
Nice. I'm gonna have to run away in a few minutes. I have a painter coming to
Mm,
paint a door. So when he gets here, I'll just run away and leave everything up and running.
okay,
How are
sounds
you?
good. I'm good. How are you?
I mean, I need to stop the ridiculous research I do daily on like the latest and greatest
Yeah.
from what's currently happening. Yeah, there's something with 504s right now that like 17 states have joined. Have you seen that?
Yes, mine's one of them. So,
Is it? My current state is not, which is
well, that's good.
nice. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious of what's going to happen. I'm also surprised, I think, how many people don't understand how much Medicaid is part of what happens in schools. I'm genuinely perplexed. Like, how did everybody not know that?
Well, I think too, it varies. So, like the way that it's done in different states, because I know when I worked in Maryland, I, as a special educator, had to do medical billing.
Yes, when I was an administrator for the district, we increased our Medicaid billing to like over $60,000 more, which is a massive amount of money for a school district to then get to decide how they want to disseminate because it goes into a fund that then there has to be a committee. At least this was how it was in California, and the committee was made up of people from all different professions within special education. I had
Mhm.
speech, OT, teachers, me. Like we had a wide variety of people. They made the decisions on like how money was allocated. Like at one point, we allocated $20,000 for occupational therapy, like
Mhm.
like tools, resources. And I just am thinking like, wait, what is going to happen if that goes away?
Well, here in Georgia, they don't do medical billing. And actually, when I first started working here, I asked them, like, hey, when do we submit that? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, the medical, did
It
you,
might
like,
be because they don't know. So where I
yeah, they don't
was,
know.
we knew, they knew, but like what I was told by service providers was like, Valerie, we're doing our service notes, we're doing our logs, we don't have time to enter all of this. So then I went back to the billers and said, can you streamline this for us? And they said if they photocopy the logs that they have to do anyway, the billers entered everything for us. And then it's just a matter of if that family received Medicaid, we got a reimbursement. And if they didn't, then we
Mhm.
didn't, which, yeah.
We didn't even have that though. Like even admin people downtown, like nobody knew what I was talking about. So I don't know if it's just stashed away in some secret warehouse where they're doing it, but
I
yeah.
know that people didn't know about it where I was either because my predecessor had done it, my boss hadn't done it, and I only knew because they called. Like the Medicaid
Yeah.
people called and were like, "Hey, you didn't submit this for a couple months. What's going on?" And I was like, "What is this?" Because I was new and didn't know, and so they had to come in and explain everything to me. So, and thank goodness, and they were the nicest people
Yeah.
ever. But I keep thinking about that when all this is happening. I'm like, what's happening?
Well, I know here there what was the other thing that I was thinking about that was really different? Oh, unions. There's no teachers unions here. So you don't have to, but like you probably should pay the like $15 a month or whatever it is to join like a legal association because yeah, you don't have any real protections.
I will say, even though we had unions, I had to go to bat for myself when I went out on leave because I always had to go out early. Because when as a teacher, you're running around so much, and like I had high risk pregnancies, and so I was always signed out early. And I called my union president, was like, they paid me wrong, blah blah blah, and he was like, they probably didn't. And I had to go back through all of my stuff and submit it, and I was right. But I remember thinking, like, wait, I thought you were supposed to help me. Like this seems ridiculous. But it was nice to know we had protections and understood like our role, other people's roles. By the way, everybody, if you have questions about special education or education, we're happy to answer. We just like
Yeah,
to chat.
here to help. Um, on that note, I've got some videos planned that I'm working on that I just need to record. And I've been
I
kind
love that
of,
you're planning. I'm like, I'm so frustrated. Like, I'm
well,
just,
I took your advice on using the tool that you always use that certain people told us not to talk about. So,
right?
no, I just used AI. I was like, hey,
Oh,
what
yeah,
do you
yeah,
think
yeah.
I should talk about?
Yeah,
But
it'll give you
she,
good ideas.
oh my gosh, yeah. So, It was really neat because I put in like so much information. So it just analyzed like what I talk about and was like, oh, you already talk about these things. Talk about these things. And I was like,
Yes,
oh, that's
I
really
agree.
cool.
That is helpful.
Yeah.
Courtney, I agree. It is a really good way to be able to
Hmm.
support the needs of your kiddos. I agree.
So I actually homeschooled my kids for like early childhood. And the problem that I ran into was trying to navigate both of them at the same time. That was really tricky. So I definitely applaud you, Courtney. But that's why I did it too, is because my kids really needed smaller class sizes and they really needed somebody who was like with them working through stuff. And it was definitely helpful.
Amy, I'm not sure what WCTU is. Oh, you have three kids. I have three kids.
Oh
Well,
my
anyways,
goodness.
changes that may be in the pipeline to IEP or 504. This is why I haven't been doing videos lately because everything feels so heavy and I just feel like we don't know what's going to happen. Here's what my advice is, to be brutally honest. I think you need to make sure you have your most recent documentation, most recent IEP or 504. If you have an IEP, I would say make sure that you have the most recent initial or 3-year reevaluation because that's the thing that talks about why your child receives the support they receive and how they were eligible. So I'd make sure you have all of that. And then I would make sure that you understand it, that you understand the document. And I will explain. Rhea has a great program called Advocacy in Action. It's led by 3 advocates. I'm one of them. We have another one who's not here right now, Carly from Behind Behaviors, and we support you through that. So I look at it as no matter what ends up happening, your child's still going to go to school. There's still going to be some educational model that's supporting your child's needs. But for you to be a great advocate, understanding what's happening in your child's learning needs is really important. So that means making sure people are being honest in their evaluation of your child, making sure that if behavior is documented, it's not just from the teacher, it should also be from like an outside observer. I was thinking about that this morning. As a teacher, you miss so many things that are happening in the classroom and you miss things you say. So an outsider can catch like, oh, every time you did this, the child reacted this way. It's not comfortable. As a former educator, I can tell you, it felt terrible when I realized I might have been doing something that was triggering a response that we didn't want to see in the classroom. But I think having that information is going to be what all parents need, I think, moving forward. I think we all needed it anyway, but I think even more so.
Well, and one thing that I've really been thinking about lately, and the reason, so we have advocacy and action that walks you through everything, but I made kind of like a mini version of it. It's called the IEP audit. And what that does is organize all the information into sections. So in the IEP audit and advocacy and action, there's this IEP snapshot and it has the area of need, it has the goals, the objectives, the data from the present levels, and the services. So instead of looking at your child's IEP like this big stack of papers, because I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm reading a book, let's just say, and I'm reading like chapter 1, chapter 2, I'm on chapter 20. I don't remember what chapter 1 said at that point.
Yeah.
I'm on chapter 20. And so by the time you've read through the present levels, you have no clue how that connects to the accommodations and the goals and the services because you read it 20 pages ago. You know what I mean? So we take you through how to get all the information out and then just put it into little tables based on the area of need. So that way you can just look at the information and it is so much easier to reference when you're in a meeting or like, trying to have a conversation with the teacher. You can easily say, oh, I see, we have this goal in reading comprehension, matches the data for their area of need, but I don't really see any services and I don't really see how we're accommodating for my child's need to actually reach this goal. Could you explain further? It makes it so much easier to have those types of conversations.
I think so too. I mean, Rhea and I both have programs that are available for. Oh, Rhea jumped off for a second. We both have programs for if you want to kind of DIY it, but I really think doing it with advocates is helpful. There's a lot of things when I'm working with clients that I like to point out as we're going through paperwork that clients are always surprised, like, oh, I didn't realize that, or I didn't realize I could ask for that. I think even understanding that goals are to teach skills so that your child can have educational success and access to their educational opportunities is really important. So all of that is to say, I don't know what's going to happen. And I am concerned. I think I'm really concerned because I think people don't understand the level of protection that like the Department of Education offers specifically for people who have disabilities. Um, so yeah, I'm not familiar with the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and I just looked it up, and I will look at it more later. I don't know anything about it right now, so I can't speak to it.
I know as far as like organizations that are helpful, I always point people in the direction of the ACLU just because they do put out a lot of good information, and I've been following them for a while, but I'm sure there are other organizations out there that are helpful as well.
I think I'm a big fan of right now. I've been really looking into organizations that support parents of children with disabilities. So
Mm-hmm.
I I let you know what's happening. I in San Jose, California, there was an organization. I don't know if it's still there. I'm thinking it is called Parents Helping Parents. It was created by a friend of my mom's. She was a fantastic woman. Her child had Down syndrome, and it became this incredible organization that helps people. Like it was all over the Bay Area, but they would offer classes for parents and how to understand the IEP. Listen, this was in the IEP. It was 5 pages, everybody. Okay, it was a long time ago, but I'm sure they still offer it. But I think just finding ways, I think there's going to be a lot of like what's happening in your community. How can you find resources in your community? Because honestly, if the Department of Education goes away and it's all led by states, what's happening in your state is going to be the most important, and in your community. And by the way, most of education is state based. The federal stuff is like the big dogs of like special education, 504, OCR, all that stuff.
Yeah, I would say there's so many things that concern me about moving to a state level. Especially if you just look at schools right now, and there are so many like points that I can make here, but if you look at school zoning maps, they're already not fair, right? We have property taxes that contribute to the funding of the school, and we have schools that are resources are unfairly distributed. So if we just start with that and we like zoom out nationwide, we're already missing half the population. We are. I mean, and I hate to say it that bluntly, but it's the truth. And so we're already looking at that problem. And then so now if it goes to the states, we have that problem on a bigger scale, right? We have states with more resources and more funding and more willingness to put towards education. And then we have the states that don't. And I know in my state, they're already consolidating schools. They're already shutting down schools. They have moved a lot of students to online education, to like it's still through the public school system, but they're using an online platform.
Bluebird Escape.
Yes.
This is all Rhea. I'm going to just sit back and listen.
I looked down just briefly and I saw MDR. I'm like, what's that question? Okay, so I'm in Texas. Can we talk about manifestation determination review process and how to approach? So a lot of parents get scared of manifestation reviews, MDR meetings, but the MDR is to prove that a behavior is due to a disability. So essentially what MDR meetings are, they are a measure of accountability for the school. So when we go to an MDR meeting, it's to say, did you meet the student's needs or not? And if you didn't, then that's why we had the behavior. So the behavior really isn't on the student. Like they shouldn't be punished for this because the behavior wouldn't have happened if we had provided the support that we were supposed to provide. So if you are a parent, an MDR meeting is a great thing. You have to have them by 10, if there's like 10 days of suspension, you have to have an MDR meeting at that point. But
is that in one school year or one calendar year?
One school year.
Okay.
I believe. That's a good question though, because I haven't really thought about the BFY.
I think it is. I was clarifying for myself. You said the right thing right away.
Yeah. So, because I mean, it would depend, like what the student's doing over the summer and things like that. But the IEP is for a full calendar year too, just to throw that out.
Yeah.
But MDR, it's a good thing if you're a parent. You can request it sooner than that 10 days. Schools will try to say that it's 10 days of out of school suspension. I always argue that it's not. They're missing instruction. If they're being held from the general education setting or whatever placement they're in, like LRE, whatever placement they are in, if they are outside of that due to behavior, like a consequence for behavior, then that should count towards that 10 days because they're not being given access to their education. And
I
every
would agree.
child is entitled to a free and appropriate education.
Yeah. I think the other nice thing with an MDR, like Rhea said, is it's really the onus is on the school. So I think making sure that there's a clear that they truly did meet the needs of your child as outlined in the IEP as well. Because I've been a part of meetings where people have had to be like, well, we weren't offering that right then because of X. Well, then that's a problem. Staffing's not a reason. Like there's things I've heard over the years that like that can't be a reason. So I think making sure, and then Rhea, I know at IEP, I'm not quizzing you. I'm genuinely asking questions. Everybody, I'm not quizzing Rhea. I was not a teacher who worked with many kiddos who, I didn't have any students who got to an MDR because I worked in a different population of special education. And I was a little over aggressive with behavior goals. Looking back, I definitely was, but I really felt like kids needed to learn those skills. But if you like at an IEP meeting, you can bring a friend or a support person. Can you do that for an MDR as well? Because they can be really emotional.
Yes, you can bring. So I think that the important distinction to make here, it kind of goes along with how I say kids are humans. And I know that sounds silly because, like, duh. But when you are an adult working with kids, it's hard. We have to remember that they're people too, right? Who have needs and all those things. And that's the same when it is applying to the IEP team. You are a person too, just like everybody else here. You are an equal member of the IEP team, and you are allowed to bring the support that you need. Friends, family. I will just caution, just like out of experience, I wouldn't overload with people. Like I would
Oh yeah, no,
prioritize who you're bringing. Yeah,
one right.
or two, like it might be a mom, a dad, and the advocate, or a mom, a dad, an advocate, and a lawyer, or a combination of things. But I wouldn't bring like sisters, family, cousins, grandma, grandpa. That it gets really hard to distinguish voices when there's so many people. But one thing schools will do, I hate to say this, I don't encourage anybody to be like shady or anything like that. But schools, sometimes if you say that you have an advocate, they'll say, okay, well, we're bringing our legal team or something like that. Or they'll say, well, we have to work it out so we can bring our legal team, and just say, okay, sure. Bring your legal team as long as that falls within our deadline.
Yeah, sounds good.
So, yeah.
Somebody asked about if they get a plan, they said the plan, and the accommodations are not working, how long do I have to wait for another? And I said IEP or 504, and they said yes. But actually, I am curious if you mean an IEP or a 504 plan. Those are two different things. I would say if it's, I guess IEP or 504, I'm a big fan of we need like four to 5 to 6 weeks to see how things are going. It takes a minute for kids to acclimate, and it also takes a minute for the teachers to acclimate and make sure we're all doing the same thing and it's kind of consistent across the board. If your child has an IEP plan, the case manager can be helping to monitor that and see how things are going. If it's a 504, it's a little bit trickier. I think staying in touch with the 504 coordinator for the school is going to be really important, but it takes a little bit of time. Nothing in education is instantaneous. And so it can be a little frustrating, but giving everybody time, I think, is important. So I would say like 4 to 5 to 6 weeks. Keep in mind, if you have a major break in there, like if you have like Christmas break or any break more than a week, it can kind of delay stuff as well because everybody has to reset. That would be my thought. What about you, Rhea?
Well, I would also say, first of all, you can call a meeting at any time. I'm
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to go back to what I said about you being an equal participant, right? So you can call a meeting at any time. And if you think it's not working, you can certainly communicate with the teacher before like the 4 to 6 week mark.
Yeah.
But you really have to know, is it working? And you need time to see that. The only time that I would go against that would be if it is I don't want to say extreme behavior, but something that's unsafe.
Agreed.
Because if we're doing something that's triggering the child, I don't want to continue that for 4 to 6 weeks, right? Like if it's very obvious that we need to stop, then do that. But
Agreed.
Generally speaking, I would wait. And then I also saw the comment about the school has 2 people in the MDR meeting that are not members of the ARD. I would look at their titles, but most likely it's someone from the district and or some form of behavior support program. It might be an RBT. It might be I'm trying to think like BCBA. It could be, like I said, it could be somebody who's legal from the district. It could be, there's a few different things, but I would definitely get their titles just so you have that information.
Um, really quick, you totally can ask questions, MJ.
Oh, I can't hear you, Val.
Sorry, I had a phone call. I ended it.
Yeah, okay.
Um, hang on. Let me tell the person I can't talk. Hang on. Can't talk in a lie. Oh, I think I have the painter
Sure.
here. So I'm going to take my headphones out and you keep answering questions. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. So I'm scrolling back because I saw a few. What's the difference between a 504 and an IEP? Um, so a 504 provides just accommodations. A 504 is accommodating for the impact of the disability on that student's education. IEPs have accommodations, but they also have goals, services, present levels, parent input. I mean, there's a lot more services. There's a lot more to an IEP, and an IEP has much more consistent data tracking and progress monitoring and things like that. Plus, there's a whole evaluation process to qualify for an IEP versus a 504 is really just a meeting to qualify and put that plan in place. And you can always ask questions. My son was approved for a 504 for ADHD. I've already been told he's in promotion in doubt. I'm not sure about the end of your question. If you could clarify, I'd appreciate it. Can they be excused if they do not have a vested interest in my child's education? Yes, they can. I would just get more information about their titles and like who they are, because like I said, it could be someone from the district who is helping to allocate resources for your child or something like that. And so you really want to know who those people are either way before you're walking into the meeting. But you could definitely request they be excused. Currently taking the 40-hour course to become an RBT, definitely giving you a follow. Oh, yay! Congratulations, Carla. That's exciting. I absolutely love behavior. I hope that you love your job, Carla. I know I was not like certified BCBA. I went for my master's program in ABA, but then I decided to stop because of ethical concerns. But I still am super passionate about behavior and supporting kiddos. Yeah. Wants to remove my son's IEP to a 504. Oh, okay, I gotcha. So moving down, hey, moving down from a 50 or from an IEP to a 504, you want to ask for all the data. What are the reasons? And then also look at the timeline of like how long this IEP has been in place, how long your child has been successful, because I see schools often will see success, right? In like the 4 to 6 week mark. And they're like, okay, cool. We can just drop this plan altogether. We're good. It doesn't work like that. We can't do that. We need to see consistent success over time. And also, I kind of just think it's cruel to give support and then take it away right away. Um,
Where are you at?
Me?
Yeah, in the questions. I can see tons of questions
Oh,
given.
sorry. MJ, how can a student with an IEP get a reduced day? Nephew has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I'm sorry, I don't know how
I
to
think it's
pronounce
muscular
that.
dystrophy. Yeah, I had an answer for that one. I think when I was an administrator at the district office, I got to work with a lot more students who had medical needs. And so I would say I would involve the district nurse for sure if the district nurse isn't involved and see what's the appropriate support. And then once the appropriate like level of day is discussed, I think there should also be a discussion on is there anything additional that can be done to support the fact that your nephew might be out of school for part of the day? Like, do they need home hospital or are there compensatory educational opportunities outside of school? That would be my suggestion. Rhea disappeared, everybody.
I'm still here. I just took it off the stand to answer in the comments, and I
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
want to
yeah.
double chin.
Let's see. Kim said confused by the verbiage in the 504 lawsuit in 17 states. Kim, me too. Honestly, I haven't been doing videos because I'm so confused by everything happening. And I'm slightly scared that everybody's going to just ask questions and I'm going to have to say, I don't know. I think the biggest thing to remember is an executive order isn't supposed to cause changes, although I think right now some of them are. I feel like we're a bit in the Wild West. Like, I don't know what's happening. All I know is what's supposed to happen and how we can continue to support kiddos. That's what I know right this second.
I was just replying to MJ. I'm gonna turn my camera back on. Hold on one second.
Wait, Kim, nobody's just a grandmother. Grandmothers are
Oh,
the best.
goodness, there are so many comments. Sorry if we didn't answer yours and I missed it.
Yeah,
Please
ask it
feel
again.
free to send it again.
Sorry. I had to run and give paint to the painter. I had to find paint. Oh, I invited
MJ.
somebody by accident. I invited somebody by accident. I'm so
Oh
sorry.
no.
Okay, I don't know what I'm doing.
It says my nephew has a physical disability. How can we get the physical things he needs, like a lift? And I did just write a comment, but essentially, looking at OT evaluation, looking at what data you have to support the need for the lift, because the more that you can show and like prove, the less that they'll argue. I've noticed. But also, I wanted to talk about the talking to the right people in advocacy and action. This is something we do. I want to say it was like week 2, maybe. We have the flow chart of, okay, this is my child's case manager, this is my child's admin, this is, the person above admin, this is the person at the district level, these are board members. Having that in a flow chart, even if you never use it, you can be in the meeting and say like, oh, okay, well, if you can't approve that, that's fine, I'll talk to Sally so and so, I'm sure she could help me.
And I think also, if we're still talking about the kiddo who has some medical needs, um, again, involving OT is important. You might want to also reach out to the PT people in the district, like physical
Mhm.
therapy. They're probably going to have a lot of good insight. I've noticed with some of the clients I work with, PT is involved a lot more for students who have different needs around gait and how they physically move around the school building to make sure there's safety. And then I think really making sure you know who the nurses are for the district, or like who they contract with, because that's all going to be a part of the puzzle to support. Like I always say, like a puzzle, which I know has a bad connotation, but I think looking at the whole picture, so we're making sure that we're meeting the needs in every area for your family member, is going to be really important.
Well, and I also want to note that, like, right now, it is hard to know what's going to happen. Like, we don't know what's going on.
We don't know.
And I think that the best way you can be prepared, like, at least for me, I've taken some solace in the fact that I am really familiar with a lot of the things that they're talking about. Like, I know what IEPs are, I know what 504s are, I know how funding is distributed, I know, how kids are going to be affected by some of these things. But then if I put myself in a parent's shoes who might not have all that terminology, it is very overwhelming. It seems like a lot of information coming at you. And I think we can only control what we can control, right? Like we can only control our own lives and try to help our community and our neighbors as much as possible. And so I think the very, very best thing you can do is get familiar with your kid's IEP or grandchild, or, get familiar with the IEP. Because even if, let's pretend like absolute worst case scenario, like I don't want to say, end of the world was the word I'm looking, like absolute end of the road scenario. Even if there's no schools, even if there's no IEPs, no 504s, you still have to know how your child's disability impacts their education, which is what the IEP tells you. And that allows you, even like I said, worst case scenario, to teach your child at home to provide those accommodations, to understand. And even if, let's back up from worst case scenario, if we have to move schools, right? Or, something like that happens, being able to communicate your child's needs. You have no idea even now how crucial it can be to have a parent who can describe their child's needs when you get an IEP from out of state, when I used to work in the school district, because sometimes they look completely different and they don't have the information we need to implement the supports in the new school district.
Or
And
they weren't clear on like what's really
yes.
going on.
And when a parent can say, okay, this is their progress, this is what this means, this is what they were doing, oh my goodness, it made it so much easier, and we could get those supports in place so much sooner because we didn't have to spend all that time trying to figure it out.
Amy, I'm really sorry. I see your comment. I started typing back, but it feels so trite. I'm really sorry that it did not work for your kiddos. I think the reality is, like, it's so hard sometimes to find the right way to do it. I see you saying school choice vouchers. I will say, I live in a state that has vouchers. Ohio has two different scholarships. One, I'm so sorry, my dogs are very excited because we have a different person in the house. We have an autism scholarship in Ohio that's pretty significant, and then we have another one called John Peterson Scholarship. And I thought it was fantastic because the significant autism scholarship was quite substantial, but it doesn't cover service providers. So like, yes, you have school choice and it will pay like the base tuition, but doesn't cover like speech, OT, things that I think are really crucial to, thanks, Sparkle,
Yeah,
um,
thanks for being here.
really crucial to having a robust program. I even checked with the state because I thought that can't be right, that we would offer this, but it doesn't include potentially, but in some programs, they're not required to offer that. And so I think if you go the school voucher route, anyone who's in here, make sure that you understand, can that school implement the entire IEP? Like if your child has OT, will they offer OT? That's really important for a lot of kiddos and can be make or break. So I think just being sure that you fully understand what it offers in its totality is important.
What is kind of frustrating to me, I think, is that a lot of people don't realize that schools don't have to provide those accommodations or services when it's a private school. Um, and school choice vouchers, while they are very helpful for family, I mean, I can understand the benefits to them. But I also see a lot of families who wouldn't be able to utilize those or who would be negatively impacted. And I just want to stand by children deserve a free and appropriate public education, no matter where they are, or, I think that what's really frustrating to me is that a free and appropriate public education is almost impossible with the class sizes we have and the funding we have and the resources we have. And I think we're all just trying to do the best with what we have at this point in schools. Um, and Amy said when districts don't want to lose the money by sending a kid to private school, even though doctors want. Um, it, I wish schools just provided these services. They should. That's what a free and appropriate public education is. Every student should be successful in a free and appropriate public education. But I'm going to get off my soapbox because I could talk for a while on that. And I wanted to answer Sparkle's question about, can you transfer your child's IEP to another state? How does that work? Yes, you can. Make sure you grab all the paperwork so you have a physical copy before you go anywhere, because a lot of times those transfers just don't work the way you want them to. So
Or
make sure
they
you
can't genuinely take some time. Like, and another reason to have, this is a terrible reason, but I was teaching even when there was Katrina, and kids lost records. Like it was before everything was digital. And so we didn't have records on kids. And so I think, again, it's important. I actually have a binder freebie, like how to create your binder for special education. It's part of both of our programs, but create a binder for yourself with all that paperwork so you can provide it to the new school to make a copy. And then they have 30 days to meet with you when you get to the new school. At least California did. It might be a little different wherever you are. It might just say, I'm so sorry about the dogs, you guys. It might just say reasonable amount of time, but they have to meet with you to update it to meet so it's on their paperwork and it follows their programming model to meet your child's needs.
I have a binder. I love that. I love
You guys,
binders.
we're advocates, and more than once in a meeting, I have leaned over and pulled the client's binder that they have and started flipping through because I needed to look at something from 3 years ago. Like, I love when parents have binders.
I also saw what is the next step if the 504 is unsuccessful. My son's social worker thinks I should request an evaluation from DOE. I agree. I also have a template that's free. You literally just like fill it in, sign it. I can't get out of the comments now. There we go. You fill it out, sign it. Make sure you keep a copy for yourself, but I would request that as soon as possible, because teachers will often want to request an evaluation for a child and they can't unless they have a bunch of data and they go to admin, and sometimes they deny them because they don't want to spend the resources. But if a parent requests it, they have to meet within 10 days and make that decision. So if you're a parent, request the evaluation. Don't wait for the school.
Bluebirdie Skate. We both have resources. I have a freebie, but I'm just going to tell you what it is. I think that you should have the paperwork, right? You should have the IEP. You should have like notice of meetings. Things are called different things in every state. You should have prior written notices that you've received. You should also have emails. You should have, if your school district uses something like Parent Connect, and you're getting massive text messages that have a lot of information, you should be printing those out. I have a client right now who half of the information I have is from those giant text messages, and it's a lot of information. So communication you've gotten from the school that explains what's going on for your kiddo. If you're getting, maybe you get weekly updates about your child. If as many as you have, I would put those in there. Those have been helpful when I work with clients. Um, Incident reports, if there's ever an incident report, and Rhea can talk in a minute of why you might receive an incident report, those should be in there. And then, of course, testing information, those big packets you get, I would put that in there too. If you don't have it all, that's okay. I would gather what you have now and start your binder now, because I'm a parent too. I know it's hard to try to find everything, and you're just trying to feed your kiddos and make sure you're reading with them and doing all the things you're supposed to do in our pandemonium of a society right now. But I would gather what you have now and put that together. If you have phone conversations, I would follow up and just like follow up with an email. Thanks so much for calling me today, Rhea. Here's what I heard from our conversation. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything, because then that gives you more documentation, because it's amazing how many things we all forget, including us. And Rhea, can you just mention really quickly why there might be an incident report?
Yeah. While you were talking, I pulled up the documents checklist that we have in Advocacy in Action, just in case, just to pull up some other options for documents that you could have. But an incident report, you want to have one of those anytime there is any kind of, well, there's a couple different types of incident reports. Let's actually back up. So you've got just your typical, like, Johnny ripped up his paper or threw a pencil or something like that. You have that type of incident report where it's just like a write-up, essentially. Then you have an incident report if there was any type of physical restraint that had to happen. That needs to be documented. If you ever, I'm saying this for anyone in here, if you ever hear anything, if it is ever reported that your child was restrained at school, you need to have the report of that. I don't care if they say we'll give it to you tomorrow. I'll wait. I will wait, because they're, number one, you want to make sure the staff was trained to do whatever it is, that they needed to do. Number two, you want to make sure that there was a reason for this restraint. It wasn't because Johnny wouldn't move from point A to point B. It wasn't because Johnny threw a pencil. It should be because Johnny was in imminent danger. That is the only reason. So you want to make sure you have that documented. And then you also, there's a few things to look for on there. You want to look for, like I said, the staff members and see if they have the training that they need. And you also want to look for the duration of the event. How many times was your child restrained, and how long were they restrained for in each of those times?
What about, can you speak really quick before you answer Bluebirdie's thing? And Bluebirdie, listen, that happens even when advocates get involved. I have clients right now where I've had to get involved and be like, they should have received the incident report. Please provide it as soon as possible. Usually as soon as an advocate gets involved, though, everything starts coming through real quick. Rhea, I also feel like seclusion time
Yeah.
should be included as well, right?
Yes. There's a lot of things that schools, and this ties in with what you were saying, Bluebirdie, about like the withholding of things. You want to know when your child is not accessing their classroom. If they were, now different districts have different things. So
Yes.
the district that I worked in Maryland, we had seclusion rooms that were,
Yes.
I don't
The
even want
state
to
that I'm in
say,
has them as well.
yeah, they're not great.
Nope.
They're illegal here. We can't do that here. But they are not there. And I remember going to the warehouse. We have a bunch of abandoned buildings in our school district with a bunch of stuff from ages past. And I can't remember the name of the chair specifically, but you might know what I'm talking about, Valerie. And it is for the purpose of restraint.
I
And
did
I'm
not
just
know.
looking at this outdated stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like, why would we ever use such a thing? But just to go back to that, make sure that you're requesting documentation of any type of seclusion, any type of restraint, any type of removal from the classroom. If they were removed from the classroom, I want documentation. Um, and that even goes with, even like to back up from like a less aggressive topic, if your child has, let's say, an accommodation for frequent breaks or breaks upon request or something like that, that's another place that I would want documentation of like, well, how often are they taking these breaks? Are they successful? Are they allowed to access Rift and Chair? Yes, thank you.
I've never heard of that.
It's not great.
I didn't see it in California, but again, I work primarily with kiddos with specific learning disability or other health impairments, so I didn't. There was a lot that I learned when I got into administration.
I also, I
Oh
wanted to
no,
go
I've
back to,
never seen that. Nope, nope.
yeah, I just Googled, yeah, it's that. Yeah. Um, Hi, how can they give us documentation about the frequent breaks? Hi. They can use tally marks. Oftentimes I've utilized like a daily behavior sheet to document those breaks, but even on a simpler level, they could use Class Dojo if that's something that your school is using. They have like a positive point or a negative point, but you could just set it as like 0 points and then just document whenever the student takes a break because that gives it a timestamp too.
I didn't mention when we were talking about binder stuff. Class Dojo is often a really good thing you can
Yes.
use as well. Because you
So,
listen, you don't always want to have like the communication is not going to just always be negative stuff. Everybody, like, there's a
no.
lot of positive information that is shared by teachers just anecdotally or in passing. And that information is often like the information we need for an IEP to
Mhm.
be successful. And so when a teacher just says in passing, boy, I started giving Johnny like a 3 minute wiggle break and he goes and does the sensory path in the hallway and we've seen a severe decrease in behavior. This is great. But it's
Mhm.
just said in passing and then everybody just keeps going. No, 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 no. We need to make sure that that is a part of sports because if that's what your child needs to be able to stay engaged in school, we want to be able to highlight that. What if the teacher who said that is absent that day and doesn't go to the IEP? They have a different general education teacher and we don't know.
Well, and I want to come back to the document checklist too, because there's one other piece to the documentation that I want to mention when it comes to behavior. But just to read this off, like I said, this is something from Advocacy in Action. It's what we give you when we first start. So you have all the documents that you can look through with us. But I'll just read it off. Pre IEP stuff. So, like any intervention notes, 504s, other documents, prior written notice for every meeting, evaluation report and other documents, speech screeners, hearing vision screenings, OT observations, etc. Any outside evaluation or diagnostic information that includes any medication that your child's on, because while part of me is like, that's none of the school's business, it is in the sense of how it's impacting your child at school. So having that all together is really helpful. um, Eligibility report. How were they found eligible for special education? Report cards, progress reports, academic records, previous IEPs, current IEP. And if you're keeping a binder, I can tell you kind of how I would do my tabs. I usually have one tab for the current IEP and progress reports related to that. And then I have another tab that has all the other IEPs in chronological order. And I saw you said he's sleepy due to meds. That's important for the school team to know, right? We don't want to hold him accountable, I guess, for being sleepy for something that, was due to medication. Functional behavior assessment and analysis. So whenever we talk about FBAs, they're called FBAs, functional behavior assessment. But I also use the word analysis in there because technically you have the assessment period where we're evaluating and like collecting the data. And then you have the analysis where we actually analyze the behavior and determine the function. Behavior intervention plan, if applicable, and crisis plan, which is what I wanted to come back to. Meeting minutes and summary for every meeting minutes / summary, any notes. And then any documentation from the teacher, reports, notes home, communication, text messages, emails, all that stuff. But coming back to the crisis plan, sorry, I know that was a lot. The crisis plan, if you have a child who has been suspended multiple times, who has been restrained ever, if there has been one restraint, one incident of restraint, there needs to be a crisis plan. We need to identify who is trained, who is going to intervene, how we're going to intervene, where, why, when we would intervene. All of those things we need to have documented.
We've been talking about the binder African. Actually, that's everything that Rhea just said is what you should have in your binder. Nothing more, nothing less. Well, you can always put more. I would say the other thing to make sure you include is if your child is getting suspended or having any behavioral stuff, I would make sure that you include that as well.
I'm gonna turn my screen around. I don't know if you can see.
It's
Nope,
still
that's
you.
hold on. Okay. Can you
Oh, now
see?
it's outside your house. It looks lovely.
Oh, it's rainy, but thank you. I don't know if you guys can see this. This is the document checklist that we have inside of Advocacy in Action. It's for you, African QD.
Yep.
If you want to take a screenshot of this, you can. I know it's not the best format. Like I said, you can join Advocacy in Action and get like the printable version. But if you want a screenshot, I'm holding it here for another couple seconds. Sorry, I'm shaky, but
I have a binder checklist freebie too on my website, which you can get to through my link tree, my stand store, whatever it's called. Rhea's is a part of Advocacy in Action, which is a fantastic course that we offer. I say course, it's a program because you don't just go away. It's not just online. We work with you. There's live sessions, and then there's also a Facebook community that we're a part of. And I think it's just like a great resource, especially right now with we don't know what's going on. But like we're part of professional organizations that are updating us as they get updates, and so then we can update the families that we work with. So
I can
there's multiple
actually,
ways you can do it.
I've got the
I'm
modules.
so sorry about the barking dogs. I'm so sorry.
We both do joint IEP meetings with the parent. I am going to, I just realized my computer is about to die. I'm going to grab my computer charger, but I've
Okay.
got Advocacy in Action pulled up like the backside of it. So I mean, of course you can join Advocacy in Action and get all the information in there, but I think it would be helpful just to see like the lessons so you can kind of get an idea of like what you should be looking at when you're advocating. Do you think that would
Yeah,
be helpful?
that sounds good.
Okay, give me 1 second to grab my charger though, because it's gonna die.
We do join IEP meetings. I will say everything changes when you bring an advocate into a meeting. Rhea and I both were teachers previously. I taught for 15 years. Rhea taught for a number of years. Rhea has more experience with younger ones and with the behavior piece. I have much more experience with middle school and high school with kiddos with specific learning disabilities, ADHD, other like other needs that would warrant an IEP so that they can receive the appropriate accommodations so they can access their educational opportunities. Um, and we collaborate a lot with another advocate, Carly from Behind Behaviors, and we all support parents in different ways. In addition to going to meetings with parents, I also prepare them for the meeting. So I won't go to a meeting unless we've had a pre-meeting, we've reviewed paperwork, we've talked about what the main goals are that the parents are looking for, and then make sure that that gets addressed in the meeting. I think the nice thing of having an advocate with you is there's times when things can get overwhelming, and I can step in and say things that I know you want to say as the parent because it's just too much and you just need a minute. I think that's a really great thing advocates do.
Well, and I think too, I've noticed that a lot of it kind of depends on the parent. Like sometimes I'll just do a document review and it's really a
Yeah.
family that just wanted to have more
Yep.
familiarity with the IEP.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you run into districts that really are not the friendliest to work with, but it takes the burden off of the parents.
Yeah.
It makes it so much easier for them to just be a parent. And I can understand why that would be something you'd want to. Because for me, like I know Valerie and I and Carly, like if we have meetings that are kind of too close to home, you know, if I have a meeting for my child or something like that, I would want Valerie to attend as my advocate. I wouldn't want to be my child's advocate and their parent in the same meeting if it was something really intense. But that's what's really cool about Advocacy in Action is that you are your child's own advocate, but you've got three advocates in your back pocket. So it's kind of nice that you can hop on the Facebook group and communicate with other people if you're running into something that you're not sure about. Yeah, so.
Yeah, my network is Rhea and Carly.
Yeah, we just kind
I'm
of found each other.
How do I mute myself?
At the bottom, it has the mic. I keep trying to. Hold on. I'm
Ah,
gonna flip it around here, maybe. Okay. There we go. Okay. So I don't shake, I'll set you here. So this is the back end of Advocacy in Action, but I wanted to show you kind of like how I set things up so you can sort of know what to look at as you're going through things. So obviously we just have a welcome here. But this also is the process that we go through when we're advocating. Like at least when I'm looking at a child's case, I'm looking at okay, what's the big picture? What happened with the intervention or the 504 or things like that? Like what happened leading up to the IEP? How were they found eligible? How was eligibility determined? We talk about the parts of the IEP, the present levels, goals and objectives, accommodations, modifications, supports, and services. And then this is where that snapshot comes in. And I think I have it here so I can show you guys kind of what that looks like. I was describing it earlier. So here's an example. You have the area up here. You've got the date of the assessment results, the goals related to that, the services, and the accommodations. And all of that fits under the area of reading fluency. So we go through and we show you each of the areas and like how they all fit together. Goodness gracious. Sorry, I'm struggling here. But after that, we kind of look at how you advocate. So oh my gosh. Oh, it's because I'm touching my finger. There we go. Sorry. So we've got how everything connects, your areas of need, using the data, SMART goals, services, least restrictive environment, the framework that we follow where we establish the need, we get specific, we identify what can support, and we advocate. But these are all just ways, this is just kind of how to go through the process. And the cool thing is you can always come back to it. You know, if you're like, okay, well, I think my child's reading isn't working out so well. Okay, well, how can I find supports for that? And you can come back up here and you can find your supports. So you have lifetime access to it, which is nice.
African Cutie, I would say, can you hear me, Rhea?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say it can be. I'm not going to lie. Having an advocate can be expensive depending on how long something goes. I mean, I've been with one family for over a year because we were working on so many different pieces. So it can be expensive, but that's why I think Rhea's program is really good because it's not as it's less than 2 hours of working with us. And so, but you get to continue to work with us. We just don't go to meetings with you, but we talk you through it. We explain what's going on. So I think it's a really accessible way for more families to receive help. I do know some places have like facilitators, IEP facilitators, and I thought that that was a good option. But I think in last week's live, somebody said they actually worked with a facilitator who made things worse. So I think it just depends on where you are. I think having somebody who can explain everything to you is really, really great. And I will leave it there. E.
My sister just
Gibson.
popped in. I have to say hi. I'm
Who's
sorry.
there that you're saying hi to?
My sister,
Who's your sister?
Jess Moxie.
Oh,
Yeah, so hey Jess.
hi.
Jessie. She hates when I
Um,
call her that, so sorry.
yes,
Anyway.
Believe I Can Academy, a great advocate teaches you how to navigate it. I think my favorite thing is when I'm sitting in a meeting and a district says something that is like wildly illegal or like not true, and a parent will sit up and say, actually, my understanding is that, and I'm so proud. Hey, I taught them that. That's awesome. I think being a previous teacher, again, it's really nice when people show their knowledge. But yes, I think my goal is always to teach people so that they feel confident doing it on their own. I have some families who absolutely do that, some families who work with me year after year, and they've said, like, Valerie, I understand it. I know what I need to do. I just want you there with us. And that's fantastic. And I'm happy to do that. I'm sure Rhea feels the same way.
Well, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier about different families and different needs. So, and I know we charge kind of differently, like the way our packages are set up.
Yeah.
And the way that I have mine, I've got a deposit and then an hourly rate. And I'm always really upfront with families about the way that I do it. My hourly rate mostly applies to meetings. So it makes it to where if you know, like maybe we can talk ahead of time and so we don't have to spend as much time with billable hours in the meeting. You know, I'm willing to work with families and try and like make it feasible. But I also really try to make sure parents are knowing the why behind what we're doing.
Yeah.
So if we're sending an email about needing an updated FBA, a functional behavior assessment, I like to talk to parents and say like, hey, we need this because we really don't have the data to show that this is why this behavior is happening. Or we really need to update these goals because we can't measure these. How are we going to know if your child's successful? And we kind of walk through the why so that way they know the red flags to look out for in the future. And I will say, and I know that you've seen this too, Valerie, some of our AIA alums, I can think of like several in particular. who are amazing. They're doing so good advocating for their kids. And
Absolutely.
it's so fun though, because they're like, oh my gosh, remember back when you told me how to do this? I did this and I requested this goal and now we're doing this and it's awesome. And so I really, obviously, I'm a business, I have to make money. But my goal is for my job not to exist eventually. I would
Yeah.
really like for that to be the
Yeah.
case. But I want to I want to charge you as little as possible in the sense of I want to get this done as fast as we can. I want to get your child success as soon as possible so we don't have to have this last a long time. Now, I will say I have a handful of clients that the school district hasn't really been cooperative and we've had to kind of continue. But I know I try to work with families and try to mitigate the burden, the financial burden as much as possible. But like Valerie said, advocacy in action teaches you everything that you need to know to advocate for your kiddo. And because IEPs are so individual, we're still there to answer those individual questions.
Yeah, for sure. What was it? Oh, I also think not not every advocate's the right fit for your case. So I think that's the other thing with advocacy is like I've had client calls and I've referred them to Rhea because it was like a kindergartner. Listen, do I have kindergarten client families? Absolutely. Absolutely I do. But if it's very nuanced and specific and it's something that's going to be much more in Rhea's playhouse, I'm going to refer them to Rhea. I think the other thing is I'm a very collaborative advocate because I worked in the school system for 18 years and I know full well the importance of being collaborative with the school team because your child is there every day. And we want that team to be supportive and excited to work with your child and smile when your child walks in that classroom. And so I approach it very collaboratively and it works really, really well. So I think also knowing who you're working with, I'm not the right advocate for everyone, and that's okay. I just want to make sure that people are getting the right support for their children because at the end of the day, it's really about your child receiving the supports they need so they can thrive.
Well, and I think too, I mean, vice versa. Valerie is much more experienced when it comes to middle and high school. And I think about how this impacts our ability to advocate in the sense of if I'm saying frequent breaks, I know that that's going to look much different for a kindergartner than it is for a 10th grader. A kindergartner is going to need supervision. Like they're going to need an adult holding their
Meanwhile, I'm
hand
like,
up.
bye, see you in 5.
Right, CM5, like it's very different. And as a parent, I wouldn't feel comfortable going to an advocate if they've only worked with high school and they're like, yeah, I'll help your 5-year-old. How? You know what I mean? Like it's, and so I would much rather, share that responsibility with an advocate that I trust and, work very closely with. And I think that's just really helpful in general, a good practice. And I also did see one question about AIA, including MDR. Yes and no. So the cool thing about AIA is it does include a lot of information about behavior because I created it. And that's kind of my background. I also have an FBA course and a BIP. I haven't uploaded it into Advocacy in Action, but if anybody who joins Advocacy in Action is interested in that, I'm happy to include it with the price so you can have it all together. But what I was saying, the cool thing is that we've included as much as humanly possible in there. And that's why we have the Facebook group, because we have individual situations like MDRs. And that's also why we have the live meetings. So we can walk you through whatever data you have for your child and exactly what you're experiencing.
African, I would say that is a tricky thing. So I was a teacher who did always find ways to give positive feedback, and I vividly remember oops, I have to drag a puzzle piece. I vividly remember a meeting, and the administrator was like, "What? Who are you? What?" They were being kind of flippant about like who I was talking about. I was talking about that student who absolutely had some unexpected behaviors on a regular basis and some behaviors that we were all trying to teach skills so that the student no longer demonstrated those behaviors. But this student also had a heck of a lot of strengths that I saw that I was going to share. And I was surprised how everybody was so surprised that I had so many strengths to share. So Africa, um, I think that it's important for you to let the team know you haven't heard anything positive in a while because your child is demonstrating positive things at school. And I think sometimes teachers get stuck in a loop and they look at a student as like, this is the student who does this. and they don't see all the other little beautiful things that are happening with your child. And I think letting them know, like, hey, we haven't heard anything positive in a little bit. And I know that this works because when I was a teacher, I had a parent reach out, not about that, just about something else, like, hey, we haven't heard X in a while. And they were right. They hadn't. And so I made sure to tell them. Or I have somebody I'm working with, which we needed to remind the team, like, we need to hear some positives as well. I had a parent say that in a meeting this calendar year of like, I don't feel like I've heard positive things about my child. Can you tell me that? And it makes everybody sit back and think about it. So I think you can say, I haven't heard anything positive in a while. I'd like to hear that. A natural time to do that might be when you're getting goal updates, or if you're on the second or third email or communication that it's just been negative. I think it's a great time to say it. Rhea, what are your thoughts?
I've seen this a lot. And I remember, not that I would share his name anyway, but I can't even remember his name. It's been so long. I had a little kindergartner boy who was rambunctious. I mean, he had a lot of energy. And I remember so vividly, I'm trying not to get angry when I say this because this teacher just made me so angry. I said, we're prepping for the meeting. I said, okay, well, like, let's list some strengths, needs,
Yes.
tell me more, because I was the one facilitating. I wasn't the teacher or anything. I was just helping her prepare for the meeting. She's like, I don't have any. He runs around this room. He tears up the room. He does this. He does that. And I'm like, there's something positive to say about this child. And so she's like, I don't have anything. You're going to have to come up with something. Okay. So we get in the meeting and I took all the feedback that the teacher gave me. And in the meeting, I'm like, he has a lot of energy. Honestly, he could probably qualify for the Olympics. Like, he can run, he can jump. And so let's channel some of that into, I had a trampoline in my room at the time. So I'm like, why don't we give him some trampoline breaks? He obviously loves it. He's really good at it. Let's do that. Change the whole tone of the meeting. And I'm like, it's not that hard. I think that a lot of times there's this conversation about strengths and needs. And I personally, this can get into a very nuanced conversation that we don't need to have right now, but essentially, I don't really believe in good and bad. I think it's all about perspective. And I think that that's kind of the obstacle that we run in when it comes to classrooms, is that we do have this idea of good and bad. And it doesn't have to be that way. Classrooms can look however we want them to. But because teachers get in this, I don't want to say mundane routine, but sort of this like, okay, I'm showing up to work, I'm doing my job, I'm going home, we lose a lot of that creativity and we lose a lot of the options to support kids just because we don't have minds that are free enough to think of those options. And I think that's what can be really helpful about doing your own research as a parent and reaching out to advocates and having advocates involved, because we have that fresh perspective to bring to the table that the teacher might not. But
I
at the
will
end of the
say
day,
too, though, I think because Rhea and I taught, we have a bit of a different perspective. I am always thinking, like, what does this look like in the classroom? Yes, of course. Um, Also, something that Rhea started saying a lot, and then now I say it all the time in meetings, is what does that look like in the classroom? So, like, when they're telling you something that is negative and or really hard to hear, saying, like, can you tell me what that looks like in the classroom? It slows the discussion down as they're having to paint the picture. And there's usually someone else at the table who can say, like, wait, but isn't, like, there's usually a wait, or there's oh, I was trying this other way. And I think it's really important to find ways to slow things down so people can talk, because people, whether or not they do it, they outwardly do it, there's a timeline. Like, they're trying to get through the steps of the IEP, and having everybody slow down for a minute can allow that positive stuff. I think also African QD, I'm going to just be really honest. As a teacher, I think the students who had the best outcomes who worked with me were the ones where the parents were sending me quick little emails like, hey, haven't heard from you in a couple months. I know progress updates are coming soon. Hoping to see those strengths that we talked about, or hoping to see a positive this month. Because you can write a little note, like, even though it's all computer generated, I used to handwrite little notes sometimes or whatever. But I think those families are the ones that I think their kiddos got the best outcomes. I don't know. Rhea, feel free to battle me on that one, but that's my
no, I agree. I am just thinking about all of this and like different contexts. And I saw Michael Sato said sometimes.
I used to work with him, by the way. He's a
Oh,
school
okay.
psych. Yeah.
Frustrated teachers only focus on those behaviors that support their negative position, and I totally agree. And I also want to put it in the perspective of a child who is in that situation.
Yeah.
I am someone with ADHD. I struggle with ADHD. And one of my friends and I were talking about this yesterday of like how every day is a fight against the symptoms, right? But we talk about I wouldn't be me without my ADHD. I wouldn't have the strengths. Sorry.
Sure.
My battery is low as
Oh,
usual.
I know. I was
I
gonna
have
say we probably have to
ADHD.
get off in like 5, 10 minutes. Yeah, you're never charged all the way, Miss Rhea.
But I think that that's kind of what I was getting at with the good and bad in the classroom is that for a long time I saw ADHD as something negative that I had to fight against, and it is. Don't get me wrong. But it's also really positive in the sense that I can hyperfixate like nobody's business. Like
Yeah.
I can get something done in 2 hours that somebody else might take 6 hours to do. And that's not like, oh, I'm better or they're worse or anything like that. It's just how my mind operates. And I think if we can shift the perspective in schools to embrace these individual aspects, like we all have strengths to bring to the table. And no one strength is better than another. Like the trampoline situation I was talking about earlier, that is a strength to have that level of energy. And it's no better or worse than a strength in reading. Like they're both strengths. And I think that the more we can open those conversations in schools and the more we can shift those perspectives, the better off we can be.
You know something, Rhea, that I've been talking about lately, because I do work with little kindergarten families sometimes, and I will say, even though I never taught them, I definitely, as an administrator, worked with a lot of little ones in meetings, and I did a lot of observations and learned from a lot of experts. But something I've been asking more in meetings lately, when they're like, your child's doing the student is doing this many times, this many times. I've started saying, how many times do non-disabled students do that in the classroom? Because often it's a lot. Often it's a
Yeah.
developmentally appropriate thing, but
Like
because there's an IEP, we're like hyper fixated
all of a
on
sudden
things.
it's a bad thing. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that's another thing that I think, especially when we're talking about littles, like, he only focuses for 5 minutes at a time. Yo, for a kindergartner, that's amazing. Why are we expecting 20 minutes of extended focus, independent work for a kindergartner? So I think sometimes being aware of like what's developmentally appropriate is a really great question to ask as well. I can see Ria's jump in to talk about that too.
Now, on that same note, I just thought of something that no one ever talks about, and parents are almost like embarrassed about for their little ones. There is occasionally a tendency for regression when it comes to bathroom toileting needs. And it's not funny, but it kind of is how silly it is because bathrooms in schools have those really scary automatic flushers. And when you're 5 years old and the thing is like aggressively flushing, these kids don't want to use the bathroom. And I just want to say for any parents out there, it's not you. It's the automated toilets and hand dryers that are incredibly loud, very overstimulating. And if that's the case, what I've done as an accommodation is to take a piece of black construction paper and tape it over the sensor and just use like the manual flushing mechanism. I know that sounds really silly, and I don't know why I'm bringing this up right now, but we were talking about things that are developmentally appropriate and like age appropriate. And it's something that comes up a lot that I just don't think people talk about enough. And I don't think we're considering when we're looking at architecture of schools and how those things impact the little ones that are accessing them. So I just wanted to like throw that out there. If you do have a little one and that's going on, it could very likely be the overstimulation of like the loud noises in the bathroom.
Believe I Can Academy, who's somebody who joins us pretty regularly, said, remember, academics are so much bigger than academics. And I agree. And Rhea and I usually say that, but I'm glad that they said that today. It's everything. So when you guys are looking at present levels in the IEP, you should be seeing everything: history, social, emotional, sensory, academics, yes, independent skills, functional skills. There, and that looks different depending on the needs of your child. Like what I was writing in IEPs is different than what Rhea was writing in IEPs. I mean, often I just had a statement of, um, there are no behavior needs at this time. Or I often had a lot more statements around the messiness of the backpack. I did not say it that way, right? But it was about like the executive functioning and the ability to organize a backpack and know that we needed to teach skills. I even had goals in the IEP to teach executive functioning skills. I kind of feel like before everybody was talking about executive functioning to the level we are, because that is a need for so many students that is impacting their access to education. If they consistently forget their homework or forget that they have a quiz coming up and always get an F because they didn't study, that's an educational need due to ADHD potentially. So it's a big picture. There's so many things to think about, but in all of those areas, there are still strengths. And I would respectfully say, I think sometimes some kiddos have such big strengths that we miss the area of need. Like they especially, and that was really true for a lot of my kiddos who had specific learning disabilities, they're often really, really able to demonstrate knowledge in the moment, but then some of the other things get in the way and people are like, well, they're choosing to not do this. They're choosing to not do their homework. They're made like, I could say specific words and I know it's going to make Rhea take a big breath. Go ahead,
Well,
Rhea.
as I, I hate to keep coming back to this, but like as that kid who had ADHD that was not supported, teachers make you feel horrible about yourself, like that you're a bad person because you forgot this. Or like today, I knew that we were starting at 9:15. It was 9:10, and I said 5 minutes is plenty of time to do my hair and make coffee. Absolutely, I'll get that done. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but we started at 9:21 because I have no perception of how long things take. And I don't think that's my fault. I think I have ADHD, and I think that that's how I feel about kids too. Like, do you think that they didn't do their homework because they wanted to spite you? They really wanted to get you. Like, no, they forgot. Like, we're all human.
Absolutely. I also think my response to Rhea is always like, you can tell I was a special education teacher because Rhea's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, that's okay.
And like, I planned it
Whatever.
5 minutes later anyway. I knew you were gonna.
Whatever works. It's fine. I think, but I think also because I was a special education teacher, I look at things so differently. And when Rhea was talking about not looking at good versus bad, I think about how often I remind clients that I work with, like, there's no value associated with my questions. I'm just asking questions. And I think part of it is, I genuinely don't have that. I just look at it as information. Everything's information. Also, by the way, Rhea, somebody said that they're working in California and they got it so that kiddos with IEPs can no longer be considered habitually truant, which I cannot even tell you like how excited I am because as an administrator, I had some people pull me aside and get really mad at me because I would say like they have an IEP, they have anxiety. This is a lot. I think with what's happening with school avoidance right now, that is massive. Kudos to you for doing that. That is incredible. That's incredible.
I've seen schools go after families for truancy because the
Yep.
child was hospitalized. Like,
Oh, I've
these
never
things
seen that.
are real right now.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
it was a mix up in like, you know what I mean? They eventually it all got worked out, but it was still
It's
these
another
folks
layer of stress
are
on
real right
families.
now.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I did want to come back to African QD. What are some good executive functioning goals? So I love
Wait, what age is African's kiddo? Is it younger?
that's actually a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up.
I feel like we've talked with her before, and I feel like it's younger. African, let us know the name,
Yeah,
the
let us
general
know.
age. You don't have to tell us the exact age. You can be like between this and this.
Well,
Bluebirdie State, we do know an advocate in Texas. Feel free to DM either one of us, and I'll tell you who it is. Happy to help. I do not work with families in
um,
Texas. It's the only state I don't work with families.
I have one client in Texas right now, and that is one of the toughest cases that I've went through in the past couple of years. Okay, first grade. So executive functioning is hard when you're talking about little ones because we're talking about developmentally. I mean, if you're 5 or 6 years old, your executive functioning skills aren't even really fully developed yet. So just consider that. But and the cool thing is though about younger ages and executive functioning is there's already a lot of support built into your general education classroom because that's something that we're working with students on just across the board at that age. Some things that I would really think about are materials management, especially for younger ones, because when you've got a lot of stuff out and about, students are going to have a really hard time differentiating what they need to use for different tasks and things kind of get all over the place. But also visual aids, like visual timers can be really helpful. I love the ones, if you want a simple idea at home, you get those like clocks. I think you can get them at like the Dollar Tree. I mean, they're just, like the white background and the black regular analog clock. So yeah. Oh, I like that one. I was just going to give a DIY, but I mean,
Visual.
so what you could do if you wanted like the cheaper option,
Yeah, yeah.
DIY, get some markers, color in that white background. Um, and then your child can see those different colored blocks throughout the day.
One other thing, keep in mind when you're thinking about executive functioning, I do think it's important to be aware of the age of the child and what's developmentally appropriate. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but it's really important. So I think working with the school, working with the teacher who should be the expert, it's going to be really, really important. Because what I was putting on IEPs for high schoolers, upper junior high, not appropriate for kinder. And by the way, just as perspective taking, I hated when I would have to pull out a manipulatives because I would always like let the students play with manipulatives first so that then we could use it for the activity. And I remember I used to always think, how do kindergarten teachers do this? And sometimes they don't do it as well. Because I definitely visited some classrooms where I thought, oh no, we need to learn manipulatives and stop eating the Unifix cubes. And I always think of the story where I stuck my hand out under a child's mouth and just out tumbled a ton of Unifix cubes.
Yeah, I've done that too.
That wasn't even the student I was there to observe.
Yeah, that's
Kindergarten.
fine. I mean, I'm just so used to like, oh, the worst is if you have lunch duty and they're like, here, can you open this packet of ketchup for me? And it's got like slobber and like jelly and mashed potatoes on it.
I
And
cannot.
you're like,
I cannot.
we'll just get you a new one. It's fine.
I don't know what Patriots bait question is. It's a great thing I sent Homer scavenger hunts to look. That's a really good idea. It also takes away the you're in trouble, you have to look for this. It's yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I don't see
I
Patriots question. I scrolled back.
I didn't see it either. I do. Rhea and I both work on Outschool too. Just I missed teaching, so I'm having a fabulous time on it. Rhea helped me get all hooked up with that, and I'm doing a lot with executive functioning right now. And it is so fun to be able to explicitly teach, and then kiddos come back the next week and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I did this or I did this." One thing that I saw for an older kiddo that helped was because everybody has like maybe you have multiple binders with a big binder, and it was too much for one kiddo. So they, or I don't know if it was too much, they was trying something else. They just do one folder. One side is what needs to be done, and the other side is what needs to be turned in. That's it. Or no more color coding anything. And I thought, well, that works too. Like what I think what Believe I Can is reminding me of is it's different for every kiddo. And you might start with one system and figure out, nope, that's not right. And do another system, and that's okay.
Well, let me also add and you already know the situation I'm talking about, Valerie, with the a small child I'm working with. There is a tracking sheet for a kindergartner where we're tracking like 14 different behavior goals, and it's an Excel spreadsheet on the computer. And this is supposedly accessible for this child. And the teacher came back and said, well, we don't do paper in my classroom. It just gets ripped up. And I'm like, but how do you expect a 5-year-old to access this Excel spreadsheet and look at their behavior, So we have to think about, okay, we don't want paper because it's going to get ripped up. But we obviously aren't going to have, right, that's what, I mean, I turned my camera off in that meeting because I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, it's crazy. But okay, to you, I guess. So, yeah. So I was like, okay, fair enough. What about a laminated paper?
I was going to say, what about lamination? Even though I taught older kids, I laminated.
There are solutions out there. It doesn't have to be either like 9-page Excel spreadsheet or nothing for a 5-year-old. We can have like laminated Velcro sheets even. So like we're not even writing on it with a dry erase marker. Maybe we're putting like a Velcro sticker on there saying like, check, we did this, whatever the case is. But I just going back to like what is appropriate for this child that's not acceptable. And I think sometimes you do, especially if you don't have an advocate and you are going in as a parent, you feel that they're not really listening. They're like, oh, no, we don't do paper. We're not doing that. Then come back with something like that. Like, okay, well, I understand that your concern about the paper is that it's going to be ripped up. to prevent that, because that's what they gave you. That's their concern. So once you provide a solution to that concern, there's not really much they can reply with.
Okay,
I
for
mean,
sure.
it can, but it definitely helps. So
Did Patriot behind chair 16?
I didn't
Did you
see
ask
any.
us a question? I don't know if you're still here.
Yeah, I saw for a
We're gonna
challenge
jump off.
JSC, but
Yeah, we're gonna jump off in a couple minutes. So
mhm.
happy to answer another question. We've been on for a little bit, and we both have to go do things in our day. But I do like doing these every Thursday. It keeps me
I
engaged.
know.
Not
Also,
just doom and
too,
gloom.
yes. Also, I've been taking your suggestion, Valerie, and trying to do YouTube videos, even though it seems
Oh
really
yeah, I've been doing that too.
pointless. I've only had like two asking, oh, executive functioning goals for ASD. That makes
It
sense.
depends.
Yeah, it depends on the kiddo. And also you can look up. So what I would do if I was a parent and I was trying to find executive functioning goals for my kiddo,
Say
whatever
it.
diagnosis eligibility, Google executive functioning skills.
Yeah.
Look at those. And then say, okay, I have noticed my child takes a really long time to get ready or requires multiple reminders, or look at what applies to your child and how it affects them. And then from there, you can bring that to the school team and you guys can collaborate to find goals or services that work really well.
Listen, I'm going to just say it. I think this is a good use of AI. Use judgment, okay? But you can type in to AI whatever your preferred model is, large language model is. My child is having a hard time with this, this, and this. To give a few things, and then see what it spits back as ways that you can support at home and at school. Believe I Can Academy was kind of alluding to that. And also, thank you so much. That's so nice. I needed that today. But I think there's things that you can do at home to reinforce a skill for sure, because that's really what we're trying to do is teach skills. We're not trying to teach compliance. We're not trying to teach, children to
Content.
become automatons. We're trying to teach skills because these are skills we all need as adults too. And so how do you stay organized, right? You have to remember you have to remember your doctor's appointment. So you can type in like, my child struggles with keeping track of their papers, yelling out in class, and remembering when assignments are due, and they struggle to use Canvas. Maybe listen, Canvas is overwhelming if every single teacher uses it full throttle. And so you can type all that in, and then chat or whatever system you use can pump out some ideas like, this might be due to this, here are some ideas. And then as you support at home and talk with the school, it might be something that does evolve into a goal for your child. The beauty of a goal is that that skill is explicitly taught, and then there's progress monitoring of that. And I
There's a
think that's
what does
really,
this look like you can collect. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's really important. Yeah.
And I also wanted to add too that we, just because I know we're finishing up, we do both teach advocacy in action.
Yeah.
It's a course, but you also have access to 8 weeks of live instruction every time, every
Yeah,
round.
you can rejoin that.
Yes, you can rejoin anytime. You have lifetime access to everything, Facebook community. But what is really cool about that is, yes, the modules and the lessons teach you how to advocate for your child, but it also gives you this opportunity. I don't want to say we're your chat GPT when it comes to IEPs, but essentially, like, you can go in Facebook and say, like, hey, this is what's going on. Can somebody help me? And we've had that in the Facebook group where somebody has an IEP meeting coming up and they're like, hey, I've noticed this isn't working so well. How can we do this? So it just gives you access to 3 advocates that can support you in that way. And then I also saw the question, is it possible to do addendum to IEPs to add goals for calling out, etc.? Absolutely. Absolutely it is. You can call a meeting at any time, and you can request anything you want, but the more data that you have to back it up, the more likely you are to see success with that.
Although, Rhea, if the little one is 6, do sixth graders sometimes just call out?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they do. And that's kind of goes back to what you were saying about like how often are non-disabled peers doing this. We're so happy to help. We're here for
Yeah,
questions
I love
anytime.
it. Honestly, if I could get a grant that we just did this and like helped parents out, so fun. African,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you ask the question. I'm not kidding. Really, this is the question. Thank you so much for letting me know that my little one is yelling out. How often are his classmates yelling out in class? Is this something that 6-year-olds do because I just have this one 6-year-old? That is a very respectful question, and it's a great way to get to what's happening for kiddos this age.
Well, and also kind of navigating the boundary of the classroom. Like, if any other student in the classroom is calling out 3 times per day, is that why? Then why would we write a goal for your child to call out 0 times per day? You know what I mean? Like that kind of conversation of what sort of standard are we holding my child to compared to the rest of the room?
I think I do the emoji of clapping hands a lot because I don't want to like type it and I'm like, yes, I agree. Oh, that's a big question at the end. Was there no signature because there was not agreement? If there's no final decision before you leave the meeting next time, no shade. This is not you. I think you might have just joined us. Rhea and I say a lot of things and there's no value to what we're saying. I think I would say if you're leaving an IEP meeting and there's been no decision, before you leave the meeting, I would ask everybody to pull out their calendars so that you can schedule the next meeting so that decisions can be made. If that didn't happen, I think after this live, you can just email the case manager and say you're curious when the follow-up meeting will be so that the meeting can be concluded, decisions can be made. Rhea, what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking of anytime, just on a general side note, anytime anybody asks a question, I immediately go through like 15 different scenarios in my head of like, well, when could this be okay? You know, and I'm really struggling to find any of that. But the one thing that I was thinking about was an initial IEP because you might not have eligibility to like have that final document, but you would still sign saying that they weren't found eligible.
But if they didn't even
Have
sign signatures of attendance, I'm curious, like, is it there's going to be a follow-up? I like what Believe I Can
that's
Academy
what
wrote.
the part about no signatures of attendance or no final
Yeah.
decision either tells me like an IEP wasn't implemented
It
or
sounds like the meeting
there
wasn't
we
done.
have to pick this up in the future.
Yeah.
Like something there definitely has to be more
Yeah,
happen
I would
in the
reach out and
future.
just see when the follow-up meeting is going to be. Also, Believe I Can Academy, I think you should reach out to me and Rhea, and we should have like a separate, just fun meeting. This is so fun whenever you join us. Okay.
Oh.
Thanks everybody so much. I have another meeting, so I'm gonna go. We're here every Thursday, by the way. Every Thursday, 9:20-ish. We're here.
I
So
like how we're just sticking with that. 9:15 to 9:20.
yeah,
We're in here by 9:30 for
yeah.
sure. So
Thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your Thursday. Bye.
bye guys.